Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to today's podcast on equipment management. And the objectives that we would like to cover on this podcast are to be able to list factors to consider prior to purchasing equipment for your organization, manage the selection and acquisition of new equipment, describe the requirements for a preventive maintenance program for equipment, provide a rationale for developing a preventive maintenance program in your laboratory or organization, and explain how to retire old or outdated equipment. Let us always keep in mind that decisions on the choice of equipment have to be evidence-based, and that the laboratory maintains an inventory of all the equipment and schedules maintenance activities to ensure optimum functionality. These, we know that we'll have new toys, we'll have new shiny toys, but to ensure that the choice of new equipment that we want to procure is not based on any financial reasons or other personal reasons, but purely on evidence-based decisions that are to the best of the organization. I would like to lay a scenario for you as usual in all of these podcasts. And the scenario is that the ELISA reader fails while performing ELISA tests. There isn't a documented procedure for troubleshooting. The maintenance log has not been updated for 2 years, and the manufacturer's instructions are missing. The question is, what should you do and why? What should you have done earlier and why? What would you do if this happened in your laboratory and why? There are many benefits in equipment management, some of which are the improved performance and performance at extremely high levels of the equipment. The test results variation over time are kept to the barest minimum acceptable, and increasing the lifespan of the equipment and also lowering the repair costs. Other benefits are reduction of the interruption of services, increase the safety of the equipment and the users, and greater customer satisfaction. Now, some of the program considerations in the procurement of equipment is the selection and acquisition. And in selecting and acquiring of equipment, we have to look at the installation. Who is going to perform the installation? Where is the equipment going to be installed? Do we have room for the installation? Do we have the necessary power supply and other ancillary requirements? Perform calibration and performance evaluation, maintenance, troubleshooting, service and repair, and retiring of equipment at disposal. I'm going to delve into these in greater detail in the next few minutes. Now, we must assign responsibility for all activities in equipment management and also train all personnel on requirements and maintenance needs, and monitor equipment management activities, including ensuring all procedures are followed, review all records routinely, and update procedures as needed. A simple thing as just updating the software of the equipment might render the equipment unusable and increase the downtime appreciably. This has got a net effect of not being able to service the needs of the customers of the laboratory. In selecting and acquiring equipment, first we must determine what are the equipment needs as we indicated. The equipment needs are predicated upon the facility requirements, and the facility requirements, on the other hand, are predicated upon the equipment needs. So one drives the other. And these may be the research questions, these may be the test menu, which drive on the equipment to be procured. Other things are the performance characteristics. Do we want a high throughput piece of equipment? Do we want a low cost piece of equipment? Are the reagents of the equipment closed or open? Are we able to source the reagents in the open market or exclusively from the vendors of the equipment? These are all considerations that must be taken into consideration in the acquisition of equipment. And in selecting and acquiring equipment, other considerations would be, is it easy to use? The language of operation of the equipment. This is vital because the equipment might be inexpensive, equipment might be available, everything might be in place except that one checkbox of language. So it renders the equipment unfit for use. Warranty, what specifically is covered in the warranty, safety considerations, and as I said a few minutes before, will it fit in the space of intended use? Now, there are various ways of procuring equipment. These could be outright purchase, where you buy the equipment from the manufacturer, or you could also lease it, and for a period of time, then it goes back to the vendor, to the manufacturer of the equipment, or you could rent it, or you could get it as a donation. Usually, depending on what the equipment is being used for and the market area, you could have different pieces of equipment covering all of these requirements: purchase, lease, rent, and donation at the same time in the same laboratory. Now, also consider whether it is central acquisition, for example, from the Ministry of Health headquarters, or are you procuring it locally, or is it through donor funding or other avenues, and whether it is bulk procurement or single procurement. And extremely important is the conditions of the contract. Manufacturers and vendors, when they can get away with it, they will vary the contract to suit them. And sometimes you find these contracts really, really obnoxious. And you find that the procurement of the reagents after you get the equipment is untenable. Now, in negotiating the equipment acquisition, you must request for the wiring diagrams of the equipment, software information. Is the software upgrade possible? Can it be done? And how frequently it will be done? The part lists has to be provided, which parts will be replaced and at what interval. The operator manual has to be also available and in a language that is understood by the end user, and installation must be done by the manufacturer unless it is a point of care device. And also the trial period, upon which, if the performance of the equipment is not satisfactory according to you, you are able, without any obligation, to return the equipment to the vendor. Before equipment is installed in your facility, you must confirm the vendor's responsibilities in writing. This is very important. Confirm the vendor's responsibilities in writing and also establish a checklist. When possible, have the manufacturer install and set up the equipment. Do not attempt to use prior to proper installation. I always have insisted, when the vendor has delivered the equipment to our laboratory, we do not even open the boxes. We just check on the checklist against the delivery pro forma, what has been sent, and we store it until the vendor is able to come. One time, when the vendor asked us to open the box, we found a simple power cord was missing, and the vendor asked us to just get a power cord. Unfortunately, the biomedical engineer was going to agree, and I said no, because if we use the power cord and something happens, then that will void the warranty of the equipment. So, as I said, we verify the package contents. And after opening, if possible, we copy the software. Now, let me discuss this in greater detail. Equipment has been installed. We have performed calibration. We performed verification and the operating procedures. After the verification, we need a maintenance program and the training of all operators. The operative word here is all. Anybody who is going to be using the equipment must be trained, and their training record has to be maintained. In calibration, we perform the initial calibration using calibrators which are made available by the manufacturer of the equipment, or we use standards, known standards, and we follow the manufacturer's instructions during this calibration. Then we determine the frequency of routine calibration, and we enter this into an Excel software spreadsheet, and determine the reliability of and performance characteristics of this equipment by testing known samples and analyzing the data, and establish stability for temperature controlled equipment, and validate performance with parallel samples. Always trust, but you must verify. We must verify the claims of the manufacturer vis-a-vis what the equipment is actually able to do under field conditions. So that is what we do by performing this performance evaluation. Then we do function checks, and we monitor instrument parameters periodically, daily, weekly, or monthly. And after every major instrument repair, we must perform function checks. Some of the equipment which have got laser beams in their systems cannot be moved even a fraction of a centimeter, and if they are thus moved, then they must be recalibrated and function checks performed. Things like incubators, we must check the temperatures regularly, not just the LED panel temperatures, but also thermometers that were placed inside the incubators. Perform wavelength calibration and autoclave temperature chart that they are performing as required. And we must perform a preventive maintenance through routine cleaning of equipment, adjustment and replacement of equipment parts, simple things like microscopes, which are extremely expensive, which require to be cleaned after every use, and a log maintained. I recommend here highly that as the manager or the director, you must perform ad hoc checks. People will not like it, but you're not there to please the people. You're there to ensure that work is done at an international level. So do your staff do what is required and what they claim to have done. Otherwise, if you don't do that, people will fill in the forms that they've done it, and you will only realize that these things are not done when there is an equipment breakdown. You must implement a maintenance program by assigning responsibility. If you assign it to everybody, then nobody will do it. So you must assign particular people to perform particular tasks, and develop written policies and procedures, and also ensure that these written policies and procedures are followed and adhered to. And importantly, maintain records and train staff. This cannot be overemphasized. In developing a maintenance plan for each piece of equipment, we must establish routine maintenance to include frequency of all maintenance tasks, function checks, and routine replacement of parts. Things like O-rings, things like oiling of parts, moving parts, things like replacements of lenses, bulbs. These must be indicated. Otherwise, you're going to get a very nasty experience on a Friday afternoon when you have extremely important samples to run, and your technician tells you that the bulb of the reader or of the microscope is blown. And the minimum time required to order and receive and replace this bulb might be 6 months. So you're stuck. And the next day or that day, you're fired. Create an equipment inventory log, which will record instrument type, model number, and the serial number, location in the laboratory. Equipment must not be moved in the laboratory without the authorization of the lab director. Date purchased, manufacturer and vendor contact information, warranty with notes of expiration date, and spare part. These must be available easily to the end user, to inspectors, and to auditors. Importantly is a spare parts inventory to include record of spare parts, log to track stock, and cost and ordering information. Ideally and importantly is that we should maintain a minimum level of spare parts in the laboratory or in the organization, things which are difficult to find, things which are difficult to order and get delivered on time. If we can maintain this, it will be extremely good and make sure that our work is done efficiently and in the best way possible. Troubleshooting. What is the source of the problem? A little story here is that a super tanker stopped functioning, and they brought in all sorts of fancy engineers who could not tell what the problem was. Then they brought this old man, and the old man took his hammer and was knocking here, knocking there, knocking the other part, and then he told one of the technicians to tighten a nut here, tighten a nut there. And when the boss saw the bill, he turned blue and says, "You just use the hammer to knock it." He says, "Yes, for knocking the hammer is $100,000, knowing where to knock. And for changing the part, I charge you $10. So critically is when you're troubleshooting, do you know what to look for? Is it the sample? Is it the reagent? Is it the water? Is it electricity? Is it the equipment? Or is it the instructions? We should know what to look for. Otherwise, we'll be in a messed up, like a bowl of spaghetti without knowing where we're coming from, where we're going, and where we are at. When in-house efforts fail, we call the manufacturer or other technical expert who may walk us through the troubleshooting and fixing of the problem. I've had this where we have called experts from South Africa and from Europe, and they were able to walk us through, and we were able to fix the problem online and get the equipment back to working. Look for options to continue service, like obtain backup instrument from central stores or manufacturer in a clinical research setting where, for example, you're doing clinical trials. I always recommend that you must have a backup equipment for every piece of equipment. You as the director, you as the manager, it is your responsibility to convince management why you need two pieces of every equipment. The bean counters, the finance people will think you're crazy and that they're better users of the finances, but you need to stand your ground and be able to argue with facts and figures why it is extremely important to have backup equipment, and also a referral system to a nearby laboratory when both of your key equipments or test reagents are not available. And then on retiring, when equipment are not working, we have and we must ensure that we put a label warning that it is out of order and do not use in large legible writing and signed off by the responsible person, either the lab director or the designee, that the equipment is not function and cannot be used until it is being checked and repaired. So when equipment needs to be serviced or repaired by the manufacturer, the lab must schedule routine manufacturer's maintenance. These must be included in the annual plan, exactly when you have a spreadsheet, that is also provided to the finance people, to the administration, to the operations, and to the lab designees, when each piece of equipment needs to be maintained, to be serviced, and by which manufacturer, so that you can trigger the request on time, and that the service people are able to come to your facility and service on time. Or if it is by in-house by medical service technicians, this must also be scheduled and performed as required. And equipment, just like human beings, will at some point reach their useful and end of use date, and either have to be disposed or to be retired. You go to some facilities and you find a place, a room, which has got all pieces of junk. Some people are just not ready to dispose of pieces of paper, records, old equipment. If it needs to be thrown away, please throw it away. But there has to be a procedure that has been approved by the laboratory and by the organization and by the relevant ministries of health or relevant bodies on how to retire and dispose of equipment. Because some of this equipment could have radioactive material, some of this equipment and all of the equipment that are used in the laboratory must be regarded as having biomedical material which could be hazardous to health. And before they are retired or disposed of, they must be disinfected and made safe properly. So in order to do that, we must have documents which we have developed written procedures for on the routine maintenance, on function checks, on calibration, on troubleshooting, and manufacturer services, and the dates. As I said earlier, and I'm repeating now, this must be done during the time that you're doing your annual planning. And there should be a dedicated logbook. Again, I'm not a big fan of paper. I prefer this to be electronically based, of the logbook of routine maintenance on calibration, service repair by the manufacturer, and all the problems encountered. This will help you build a history of every single piece of equipment, and it will make it very easy for you to provide the justification when it comes to retiring of the equipment and your request for a new piece of equipment. And also in the logbook, also indicate the function checks, whether they have passed or not passed, and record the problems, the date that the problem occurred, whether the equipment was removed from service, the reason for breakdown or failure, and the corrective actions taken, the date that equipment was returned to use, and change in maintenance or in function checks. All of these must be indicated. And I've got examples that I can provide to you upon request, or exactly how the logbook looks like, and what you need to do. So in summary, an equipment management program will address equipment selection, preventive maintenance, procedures for troubleshooting and repair, and documents and records will include inventory of all laboratory equipment, information provided by the manufacturer on operation, maintenance, and troubleshooting, and records of all preventive maintenance and repairs activities. The key message from this podcast is that a well-organized equipment maintenance program provides for the following: high level of performance and greater confidence in the reliability of results, fewer interruptions in test performance, lower repair costs, and elimination of premature replacement of equipment. Increased safety for laboratory workers will result from well-maintained equipment. A major part of equipment maintenance is preventive maintenance. Prevent it before it occurs. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome your questions, your comments, and other observations on my email address, joundo664@gmail.com. That is undo664@gmail.com. You can reach me via my LinkedIn page or my Facebook page or X and TikTok pages. Thank you and see you.